Millionaire father sees black bricklayer feeding his blind daughter and has his life changed forever. Roberto Albuquerque, a millionaire, was paralyzed watching the scene, unfolding in the garden of his mansion in Morumbi, São Paulo. A black bricklayer with calloused hands and clothes worn. From work, lovingly fed. His daughter, Clara, the same daughter he had barely been able to look at since the accident that left her blind 2 years earlier. There, Clarinha, just one more spoonful, Marcos Oliveira said with a kindness that made Roberto feel as if a knife was twisting in his chest. Clara laughed, a sound that Roberto had almost forgotten. At 8 years old, she hadn't smiled like that in her father's presence in a long time. The girl raised her hand, finding Marcos's face with surprising precision. "Tell me more about the colors of the garden, Marcos," she asked. "I want to see through your eyes." Roberto cowered in the shadows of the terrace, feeling a toxic mix of shame and anger rise inside him. How this man who had only known Clara for 2 weeks was able to connect with her in a way that he, her own father, could no longer. Albuquerque. Construções was one of the largest companies in the country, specializing in luxury buildings that transformed the urban landscape. But Roberto Albuquerque could not build a bridge to his own daughter's heart. The accident had happened on an ordinary afternoon. A drunk driver, a blind curve, and Clara's life is changed forever. Roberto was at the wheel and was physically unharmed. Emotionally, he was a wreck, drowning in work and guilt. Since then, Clara lived under the care of well-paid nannies and nurses, while Roberto hid in the upper floors of the mansion or in his office in the city. The arrival of the garden renovation team, led by Marcos Oliveira, should not have changed this entire wrong dynamic. However, something was changing, and Roberto didn't know how to deal with it. "Senor Albuquerque," the voice of his housekeeper, Mrs. Lords, interrupted his dark thoughts. "You have an important connection from Dubai regarding the Allen project." Roberto nodded half automatically, taking one last look at the garden before heading to the office. As he walked down the hallway, he stopped in front of the framed photograph of his late wife, Eliana. "You would know what to do," he murmured. "You always knew." At that afternoon's meeting with investors, Roberto was distant, his mind returning repeatedly to the scene in the garden. When he returned home, he found Mrs. Lords waiting with a worried expression. "Sir," Clara's piano teacher called. "She missed the 3rd class in a row. Like this? Didn't the nurse take her?" "Clara refused to go, sir," the housekeeper hesitated. "She said she hates the piano, now that she can't see the keys." Roberto felt the weight of guilt increase even more. Eliana was a pianist and Clara always loved her classes. That night, unable to sleep, Roberto went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Was surprised to hear voices coming from the garden. Approaching the back door in silence, he saw Marco sitting near the fountain with Clara. "Well, after hours, my father doesn't love me anymore, since I went blind," the girl said, with a certainty that tore at Roberto's heart. "He can't even be in the same room as me." "Don't say that, little one." Marcos's voice was firm but gentle. Sometimes, adults don't know how to deal with pain, especially the pain of the people they love the most. "Have you ever lost someone you loved?" Clara asked. A long silence followed before Marcos responded. "Yes, my daughter, Sophia. She was almost your age." Roberto froze, something in Marcos's voice, a deep and familiar pain. It kept him trapped in the shadows. "What happened to her?" Clara asked. "She got sick. Leukemia. We fought for 3 years, but..." Marcos took a deep breath. "What I've learned, Clara, is that the time we have with the people we love is too precious to waste in fear." Roberto stepped back, silent as a shadow, his entire world crumbling as he realized the true nature of his behavior. It wasn't protection, it was cowardice. And as he climbed the stairs back to his empty room, one question haunted him. What kind of man would abandon his own daughter in her hour of greatest need? As a stranger carrying his own devastating pain, he found the strength to offer her comfort. What Roberto didn't know was that Marcos Oliveira was not just a simple bricklayer with a kind heart. There was much more to his story than anyone in that mansion could imagine, and the truth that would emerge in the coming weeks would forever change the fate of everyone involved. If this story of guilt, redemption, and unlikely connections touched your heart, prepare to discover how the encounter between these two men, broken by life but united by their love for the same child, will trigger a series of revelations that no one could have foreseen. In the days that followed, Roberto intensified his investigation into Marcos. He discreetly hired a specialized company, something routine in his business. "I want everything about him, especially this daughter," he mentioned. He ordered the investigator over the phone without taking his eyes off the monitor that displayed the garden cameras. Through them, Marcos and Clara observed, and the bricklayer demonstrated impressive patience, transforming the garden into a sensory space for the girl, teaching her to identify plants by touch and smell, describing colors with analogies that she could understand. "This red is like the warmth of the sun on your face on a summer afternoon." Roberto listened to him explain as Clara touched a rose. The accuracy of that description astonished him. The report arrived in 3 days. Roberto opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Marcos Oliveira, 42 years old, graduated with honors in civil engineering, married to Emilia Oliveira, deceased from cancer. Father of Sofia Oliveira, deceased leukemia, age 7. After consecutive losses, he abandoned his promising career. A source close to him says he needed to do something with his hands to keep from going crazy. He started out as a gardener's helper, eventually moving into construction. Roberto walked away in a daze. Marcos was not just a bricklayer, he was an engineer who could be managing entire projects. How could he smile after losing everything that night? For the first time since the accident, Roberto entered Clara's room while she was sleeping. Hesitantly, he touched her hair. The first real contact in almost 2 years. The next morning he did something surprising. He canceled 3 important meetings and prepared a picnic. Clara went down to breakfast and found her father waiting. "I thought we could spend the day together in the garden." The shock on the girl's face was followed by a radiant smile. "Same, Daddy. Aren't you very busy?" That innocent question destroyed him inside. The day was strange at first. They sat near where Marcos was working. When the bricklayer appeared, he made a move to leave. "Marcos," Clara called, recognizing his steps. "My father is with me today. Come and meet him." The two men exchanged a look loaded with unspoken meanings. In the following weeks, a new routine was established. Roberto watched, trying to understand how someone who had lost so much could give so much. One particularly pleasant afternoon, he approached Marcos. "How do you do it?" he asked, vulnerability evident in his voice. "After all, how can you be so present for my daughter when I, her own father, can barely look at her without choking on my guilt?" Marcos stopped his work. "When Sofia was dying, she made me promise something. Daddy, promise me you'll keep seeing colors." I didn't understand at the time. He looked at Clara, sitting near the fountain. "Your daughter is alive, Mr. Albuquerque. She needs you to see her colors, not just her blindness." Those words hit Roberto like lightning. For 2 years he had seen only the disability, not the vibrant child. The next day, something unexpected happened in his office. Roberto received an anonymous envelope. Inside, a medical record and a note. "You need to know the truth about the doctor who treated your daughter." The file contained serious allegations against Dr. Bastos, the neurologist who had declared Clara permanently blind. The doctor, apparently with a history of hasty diagnoses and inadequate treatments, was quietly transferred between hospitals. After lawsuits were silenced by confidentiality agreements, Roberto felt his blood run cold. What if Clara's blindness wasn't irreversible? What if there was a chance that Dr. Bastos had overlooked? A name in the file caught his eye. In similar cases, Sofia Oliveira, wrongly diagnosed with terminal leukemia. The envelope slipped from his hands. Connections began to form in his mind. A disturbing web connecting Clara's accident, Sophia's death, and Marcos's presence in her life. Suddenly, the chance that had brought Marcos to his garden seemed far from a coincidence. Could it be possible that this man who lost his daughter to the same doctor was there for revenge? That night, as he drove home, Roberto was torn between hope and fear. What did Marcos really want? Why get so close to Clara? And why send that file anonymously? The answers were closer than he imagined and would reveal a dark conspiracy that would challenge everything he believed about loyalty, justice, and the true nature of revenge. The waning moon dimly illuminated Roberto's office as he typed furiously, immersed in an investigation that had consumed his last 72 hours. Pages and pages of medical records, financial reports, and time-worn photographs covered Mahogany's desk. In the center, a photo of Marcos with a little girl, his late daughter Sophia. The same abnormalities in the exams, the same neurologist, the same failed experimental treatment. Roberto muttered, connecting the dots that formed a disturbing pattern. In the morning, Roberto called an urgent meeting with his most trusted lawyers. I want everything about Dr. Bastos. I want to know about every penny that has come in and out of his accounts over the past 10 years. I want to know who is protecting him. As the lawyers left, Roberto remained looking at the garden, where Clara practiced identifying flowers by touch, guided by Marcos's calm voice. His proximity no longer bothered him. Now it terrified him. Sir, Marcos is on line 2. He says he needs to speak to you, urgently, his secretary announced. Marcos's voice was tense and sweaty. Mr. Albuquerque, I need to cancel tomorrow's work. I have an important doctor's appointment for Clara. Clara, why would you be taking my daughter to the doctor? Roberto felt a shiver run down his spine. A heavy silence filled the line. I think we need to talk in person tonight after Clara goes to bed. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Roberto canceled all his meetings and returned home, finding Clara and Marcos in the garden, sharing stories as usual. Watching them, Roberto could no longer distinguish innocence from manipulation, the intentions behind. Marcos' kindness now seemed dark and threatening. When Clara finally fell asleep, Marcos was waiting in the office. He bluntly placed a folder on the table. I believe you have already received similar information, the bricklayer began, his face a mask of restrained emotion. I was the one who sent the first envelope. I needed to know if you were alert enough to realize what was going on. And what exactly is going on, sir, Oliveira? Roberto's voice was icy. Marcos opened the folder. Dr. Bastos is not just incompetent. He is a criminal. He is conducting unauthorized experiments, misdiagnosing patients to include them in his protocols. My Sophia did not have leukemia. She had a treatable condition that was deliberately misdiagnosed. And of course your daughter's not permanently blind. Her condition can be reversed with proper treatment. Marcos took a deep breath. Mr. Albuquerque, your daughter and mine were victims of the same man. The revelation hit Roberto like a punch. Why didn't you go to the police? I tried. Marcos's bitter laugh echoed through the room. Dr. Bastos is protected by powerful people. I have proof, but I need someone with enough resources to expose him. So you approached my daughter to manipulate me? Roberto accused, his anger growing. No. Marcos's eyes flashed with intensity. I sought employment here because I knew his daughter had been a patient of yours, but I approached him because I was a patient of yours. Clara, because her voice wavered, because she reminds me of my Sophia, and because no child should have to go through what our daughters went through. Roberto stared at the man in front of him, torn between distrust and hope. I'm not asking you to trust me, Marcos continued. I'm asking you to trust the evidence. He slid another folder across the table. I've contacted Dr. Elisa Matos, a specialist in ocular neurology. She reviewed Clara's exams and confirmed there is a treatment, but we need to protect her from Dr. Bastos. He can't know we're investigating. Why not? Because Clara is not the only one. There are other children, and I believe that Bastos is about to begin a new phase of his experiments. Marcos hesitated a few years ago. I tried to confront him directly. A week later, Sophia had an unexpected complication. 2 days later, she was dead. The air seemed to freeze between the two men. The suspicion Marcos had just revealed was so monstrous that it defied comprehension. A respected doctor, deliberately harming patients to advance his research. I need you to take Clara to see Dr. Elisa tomorrow, Marcos said. She agreed to meet with us discreetly. If we can confirm that Clara can regain her sight, we will do more than that, Roberto interrupted. A fierce determination lit his eyes. If what you are saying is true, we will destroy Bastos and everyone who protects him. The plan began to take shape as the night wore on. Roberto would marshal his resources, media contacts, private investigators, elite lawyers. Marcos would contribute his knowledge, meticulously gathered over years of our research. The solitary confinement including the names of other affected families. The next day, under the guise of a family outing, Roberto took Clara to Dr. Elisa's discreet clinic. The examination was exhaustive, but it confirmed the unthinkable. Clara's blindness was reversible. The original diagnosis had been, at best, grossly incompetent, at worst, deliberately falsified. As they left the clinic, Roberto held his daughter's hand with new determination. What had begun as suspicion had become a shared mission. Two fathers, a white billionaire and a black construction worker, both torn apart by the same evil force, were now united by a common goal: justice for their daughters and protection for the children who might yet be victimized. What Dr. Bastos could not have imagined was that while he calmly went about his luxurious medical routine, a merciless storm was gathering on the horizon. A storm that would leave no stone unturned in his carefully constructed empire of lies. The courtroom was dead silent as Dr. Bastos was hauled away in handcuffs. His empire of lies, the lies had crumbled in a matter of hours, exposed by the unlikely alliance between Roberto Albuquerque and Marcos Oliveira. This is just the beginning, the prosecutor announced. The investigations have already identified more than 40 children affected by Dr. Bastos's fraudulent diagnoses. As they left the courtroom, reporters surrounded Roberto and Marcos. Clara, holding both of their hands tightly, wore a serene smile. Her eyes, previously empty, now followed. The movements around them with increasing precision. Mr. Albuquerque, how did you discover the fraud? Asked a reporter. The truth finds unexpected paths, replied Roberto, exchanging a meaningful look with Marcos. Sometimes we need to lose everything to see what really matters. 3 months later, in a discreet ceremony, the Sophia Foundation opened its doors. The treatment center, built in record time with Roberto's resources, was already treating Yarmoipin children misdiagnosed by Bastos. We didn't just want justice, explained Marcos during the inauguration. We wanted to transform this pain into something that could save other families. Dr. Elisa, now the foundation's medical director, had adapted Bastos's experimental protocol. Ironically, his research could have saved countless lives, including Sophia's, if it weren't for the clear greed whose vision improved weekly, which became the face of the foundation. His story inspired families to seek second medical opinions and to question seemingly definitive diagnoses. Meanwhile, Bastos's financial empire was crumbling. Hospitals associated with him faced million-dollar lawsuits. Colleagues who covered up his practices were indicted. The system that had protected his negligence for so many years now turned against him. Roberto, transformed by the experience, completely reorganized his priorities. Albuquerque Construções, previously focused exclusively on profit, now allocated 30% of its projects to children's hospitals and medical research centers. Clara taught me that our eyes can be open, but we still don't see what matters, he confessed in a rare interview. On a particularly significant afternoon, while Clara was playing with other children in the foundation's garden, Roberto found Marcos watching the scene with tears in his eyes. Sophia would be 11 today. commented the former bricklayer. Roberto nodded, silently. After a moment, he asked, "Do you think we did her justice?" Marcos watched the children playing. Justice is different from revenge. Revenge would have been to destroy the sticks and stop there. Justice is to ensure that his evil does not happen again. "Do you know what haunts me the most?" continued Roberto. "If it weren't for you, I would never have discovered the truth. I would have spent the rest of my life away from my own daughter, believing that her condition was irreversible." "And if it weren't for you," Marcos replied, "I would never have been able to expose so much. My voice alone didn't have the necessary range." That week, a special child arrived at the Ema Silva Foundation, 7 years old, diagnosed with the same condition as Clara. Her parents, unable to afford private treatment, had lost hope until they saw a report about the Sophia Foundation. "You always know when a child regains their vision," Dr. Elisa explained, observing Emma during her first appointment. "There is a moment when your eyes begin to follow the world and suddenly light up with recognition." 1 year after Bastos's trial, the Sophia Foundation garden witnessed a special celebration. Clara, now with her vision almost completely restored, blew out the candles on the birthday cake. Beside him, Emma and other recovered children applauded. Roberto, observing the scene, realized that his own blindness had been cured as much as, whereas before Marcos came into his life, he was just existing, accumulating wealth, missing human connections, hiding behind walls of privilege. An unlikely partnership was born that transformed lives and the meaning of family, proving that the strongest bonds are not necessarily those of blood, but those forged by compassion, shared purpose, and the understanding that are pale in comparison to the values that. "There is a blindness worse than physical blindness," he confided to Marcos. "It is the blindness of those who only see money, status, and power." On the main wall of the foundation, a simple plaque displayed a powerful message in memory of Sofia Oliveira, who taught us to see beyond appearances. And so, from a shared tragedy, an unlikely partnership was born that transformed lives and redefined the meaning of family, proving that the strongest bonds are not necessarily those of blood, but those forged by compassion, shared purpose, and the understanding that our differences pale in comparison to the values that unite us. If this story of justice and redemption touched your heart, keep reading for more stories that remind us that sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters. Yeah, none likely. Partnership wa. If this story touched your heart, then our journey is just beginning. Like and subscribe to Heroic Echoes, and don't forget to share this story with the people you care about most, because every echo has the power to become a hero's story.